Free, it says. But you seem quite stuck.
The sign was written in 17 languages. 17. Someone had gone through the trouble of translating it into every major tongue spoken on Keth Station. And the message was the same in every single one of them. Free. No one will take her. And she was just standing there, chained to a support post in the middle of Keth Station's lower market, surrounded by 10,000 beings going about their day. And not one of them, not one, would even look at her. Marcus Webb looked. And that, as it turned out, was the most consequential thing a human being had done in the past 300 years. Stay with me, because this story goes places you are not ready for. You're going to find out why every sapient species in that market walked past her without blinking, and why every single one of them was terrified. You're going to find out what she actually was, not what the sign said she was, not what the traders whispered she was, what she actually was. And you're going to find out what happens when the most dangerous political faction in the known galaxy decides that one human trader from Ohio made a very, very inconvenient choice. Buckle in. This one goes all the way to the end. Let's talk about Marcus Webb, because you need to understand who he was before any of this makes sense. Marcus was 34 years old, born in Columbus, Ohio, and he had been operating as an independent cargo broker on the Keth circuit for 6 years. Not military, not government, not one of the big interstellar trading houses with their private fleets and their diplomatic immunity. He was a one-man shop with a leased hauler called the Sable Meridian, a battered Cassander-class freighter that smelled faintly of machine oil and the garlic shrimp he cooked on board because he refused to eat nutrient paste like everyone else. He was, by every measurable standard, unremarkable. He had a commercial broker's license, a clean customs record, and a reputation among the station traders as someone who delivered on time and didn't ask stupid questions. He knew 6 alien languages well enough to haggle, 2 more well enough to curse in, and Keth Standard well enough to talk his way out of most situations. He had never fired a weapon at another person. He had never led anyone into battle. He had never had any particular ambition beyond turning a consistent profit, keeping his ship fueled, and eventually saving enough to buy a small piece of land somewhere green that didn't have a docking fee. That was Marcus Webb, a man with no destiny, no chosen one backstory, no latent superpower. Just a guy from Ohio who happened to be walking through the lower market on Keth Station on a Tuesday, or what passed for Tuesday, on a station that rotated its light cycles on a 26-hour clock, when he saw the sign. Now, Keth Station itself deserves a moment of description, because the setting matters. Keth Station was a transfer hub. Think of it as the interstellar equivalent of a major international airport. Except the airport is roughly the size of a small moon. It's been continuously inhabited for 400 years, and the departures board lists destinations in 47 star systems. It sat at the intersection of 2 major trade lanes, which meant it was always busy, always loud, always crowded with beings from a staggering variety of species. Traders, haulers, diplomats, refugees, scientists, criminals, tourists, and everything in between. The lower market was the oldest section of the station. The original merchants had set up stalls in those corridors 4 centuries ago, and the descendants of those merchants, biological and commercial, were still there. The corridors were wide enough for a Gren cargo mover to pass through, which meant they were wide enough for about 8 humans walking abreast. And the stalls lined both sides from floor to ceiling, selling everything from raw mineral components to cooked food to information brokerage to artworks Marcus couldn't begin to interpret. It smelled like 100 different kinds of cooking, machine lubricant, alien biology, and old metal. Marcus loved it. It was, in his words, the most honest place on the station. Everybody there wanted something from everybody else, and nobody pretended otherwise. He was on his way to meet a parts dealer. He needed a replacement motivator coupling for his port thruster cluster. It was a boring errand on a boring Tuesday. Then he saw the post. The support column was one of dozens running floor to ceiling through the lower market. Structural members left exposed in the original construction. Traders sometimes rented space on them for advertising. Merchants occasionally leaned cargo against them while they argued over prices. This one had a chain wrapped around it. The chain was secured with a lock the size of Marcus's fist, and it connected to a smaller chain, and that smaller chain connected to a metal cuff around the left wrist of a woman who was sitting on the floor with her back against the post, her knees drawn up to her chest, her eyes closed. She was not human. She was close to human in the way that a great deal of the galaxy's sapient life was close to human. Bilateral symmetry, recognizable limbs, a face organized roughly the way faces tended to be organized when evolution had solved the problem of binocular vision and social expression in a gravity well. But she wasn't human. Her skin was a deep, shifting blue-violet, not painted, not a costume, not bioluminescent in any active way. Just that color the way human skin was its color. It had a faint iridescence to it, the way a raven's wing catches the light differently depending on the angle. Her hair was dark and worn loose, and it had white streaks in it that moved. Not swaying in a breeze, but genuinely moving, shifting slowly the way oil moves on water. Her features were fine and angular. Her ears came to subtle points. She had 4 fingers on each hand instead of 5. She was also, and Marcus noticed this with the particular attention of someone who spent his life reading rooms, completely, pointedly ignored by everyone around her. Not overlooked, not simply unnoticed in a crowd, actively avoided. He watched a Gren cargo mover, a being 8 feet tall and roughly the mass of a small vehicle, navigate a full body width to the left to avoid passing within 10 feet of her. He watched a pair of Thessi merchants, who were chattering rapidly in their language and not obviously paying attention to much, fall abruptly silent and increase their pace when they drew near. He watched a human, one of maybe 30,000 on the station. Glance at her, glance at the sign, and then very deliberately study the stall on the opposite side of the corridor. Marcus stopped. He read the sign. It was a physical placard, mounted on a short stand beside her, and it was covered in text, dense rows of different scripts, each one saying the same thing. He could read 4 of them. They all said the same thing: free. No one will take her. Free. He stood there for a moment. He looked at the sign. He looked at her. He looked at the crowd flowing around her like water around a rock. He thought about his motivator coupling. He thought about the fact that he had a delivery in 32 hours and he did not need complications. Then he walked over. Here is what you need to understand about the moment Marcus Webb walked toward that post, because it might be the most important 10 steps in this entire story. He was the only person in a market processing roughly 40,000 foot movements per hour. He was the only one who crossed the invisible line that every other being of every other species had silently agreed not to cross. Why? We're going to get to that. But first, you need to know what happened when he got there. He crouched down in front of her. She didn't open her eyes. He said, in Keth Standard, the station's common tongue, "Hey, are you okay?" She opened her eyes. They were silver, not gray. Silver, like polished metal, with no visible pupil, just a slight darkening at the center. They focused on him with an alertness that was immediately at odds with the defeated posture she'd been sitting in. This was not a being in shock. This was a being who had been waiting. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, in perfect Keth standard with an accent he couldn't place, "You are human." "Yeah," he said. "You are the first being to speak to me in 11 days. Marcus looked at the chain. He looked at the lock. He looked at the sign. He said, "Who put you here?" "The Theresi Merchant Collective." She paused. "They believe they are disposing of a liability." "And what do they think you are?" She held his gaze without blinking. "They think I am Valkyrie." Marcus had been on the Keth circuit for 6 years. He'd picked up a lot of station lore. A lot of trader gossip, a lot of the kind of cultural knowledge that kept you from accidentally starting an incident. He knew that word. Valkyrie. He also knew that what he was supposed to do, what every being in that market had apparently done for 11 days, was stand back up, mutter an apology, and walk away very quickly. Instead, he said, "Do you want to leave?" She blinked. Once. Slowly. Like the question was so far outside anything she'd modeled that she had to physically process it. "Yes," she said. "I want to leave." Marcus looked at the lock. Then he looked at her. Then he pulled out his comm unit and found the station security contact. "I'm going to call this in as unlawful detention. That'll get security here in maybe 40 minutes. Or..." He looked at the chain again, thinking, "I know a Keth metalworker 2 stalls down. She can cut that in 5 minutes. Your call." The alien woman stared at him. "Metalworker?" she said. "Good choice," Marcus said. "What's your name?" "Zara," she said. "Zara Vel..." She stopped, corrected herself. "Zara, just Zara." "Marcus Webb," he said, and held out his hand. She looked at it. She clearly knew what the gesture meant. Handshakes had made it into interstellar common knowledge through human contact protocols. But she looked at it like he'd offered her something she'd been told was poisonous. Then she took it. Nothing happened. No explosion, no catastrophe, no divine alarm. Just a handshake between a trader from Ohio and a woman with silver eyes and moving hair who had been chained to a pole for 11 days. Marcus went to get the metalworker. The metalworker's name was Greth, and she was Keith, a species that looked approximately like what you'd get if a very large iguana decided to become bipedal and go into skilled trades. She was good at her work, she charged fair rates, and she had sold Marcus 3 replacement components over the past 2 years. When Marcus told her what he needed the bolt cutter for, she went very still. "The female at post 17, she said, not a question. "Yeah." "Marcus." She said his name with the Keth intonation, which was a sort of rolling click in the middle. "You know what she is?" "She told me what people think she is," Marcus said. "I'd like to know what she actually is, but first I'd like to get her unchained." Greth looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "The Valkyrie are a death sign. Every culture in the Keth circuit knows this. You see one, you walk away. If you touch one..." "Greth," Marcus said. "I've already touched her." I shook her hand. Nothing happened. Greth made a sound that was deeply uncomfortable. "Marcus, please, I have children. And I have a chained woman sitting on a floor who's been there for 11 days. Marcus said, very quietly. "Will you help me or not?" The silence between them lasted about 4 seconds. Then Greth said a word in Keth that Marcus didn't know. But from her tone, it was probably something like, "You absolute idiot." And she grabbed her cutter and went with him. "Now, This is where the story really starts to open up. Because we need to talk about the Velkhari. The Velkhari were real. They weren't a myth, they weren't a legend. They were a genuine species. Or rather, they had been. The history was complicated in the way that all interstellar history is complicated, which is to say, everyone agreed on the basic facts and disagreed violently about what those facts meant. The Velkhari were, to use the closest approximation, precognitive, not in a mystical sense, not in the way superstition defined the word, in the literal, documented, peer-reviewed scientific sense. The Velkhari could perceive probability fields. They could, to varying degrees of precision and range, perceive the likely trajectory of future events. Not with perfect certainty, not with a clear vision of a single predetermined outcome, but with a probabilistic awareness that was accurate enough in controlled studies conducted 300 years ago to constitute genuine foreknowledge. Every culture in the Keth circuit had a word for them. Every culture in the Keth circuit had a story about them. And virtually every one of those stories had the same ending. Someone saw a Velkhari. The Velkhari said something. And then something terrible happened. This was the origin of the death sign belief. The Velkhari didn't cause the terrible things. The science was very clear on that. They perceived probability. They didn't generate it. But they often knew that terrible things were coming, and sometimes they said so. And sometimes they tried to prevent them. And the pattern of a Velkhari appearing, and then something catastrophic occurring, had burned itself into the cultural memory of so many species that it had become indistinguishable from superstition. There were 3 problems with all of this, and Marcus would learn all 3 of them in the next 48 hours. The first, the Velkhari were supposed to be extinct. Their homeworld, a planet called Velka in the common tongue, the Velkhari themselves had a different name for it, which human vocal anatomy couldn't produce, had been destroyed. Not metaphorically, not culturally, not through colonization or war or economic absorption. Literally destroyed. 300 years ago, Velka had been struck by an object of sufficient mass and velocity to render it uninhabitable within a decade and geologically unrecognizable within a century. The surviving Velkhari had scattered, some to refugee stations, some absorbed into other populations, some simply vanished. The current scientific consensus was that the Velkhari, as a distinct population, had not existed for approximately 200 years. Individuals of partial Velkhari ancestry might survive here and there. But a full-blooded Velkhari, someone with the complete genetic heritage and the full expression of their perceptive abilities, was, theoretically, impossible. The second problem, Zara was clearly, unmistakably, one of them. And the third, the one Marcus would take the longest to fully understand, was that her presence on Keth Station was not an accident. She was quieter than he expected once they got her free. Greth had cut through the chain in 45 seconds flat, collected her fee with the expression of someone who expected to die imminently, but was determined to be professional about it, and removed herself from the immediate area at a pace that could charitably be called brisk. Zara stood up. She was taller than Marcus had realized, about 5'10", and she moved carefully, like someone testing whether her body still worked, rolling her shoulders, flexing the hand that had been cuffed, turning her head to look around the market. She looked at the crowd parting around her. "They all do that," Marcus said. "They always do that," she replied. Her voice was even, not bitter, just accurate. "Where were you before the market?" he asked. "Before the Theresi had you?" She turned those silver eyes on him, and there was something in her expression that Marcus couldn't read. an assessment happening at multiple levels simultaneously. "Why are you helping me?" she said. "You should know what I am by now. You've been on this station long enough to know the stories." "I know the stories," Marcus said. "The stories say you're bad luck." "The stories say I am death walking," she corrected, precise and without apparent emotion. "They say to look at me is to invite catastrophe. They say what the Theresi believed, that I am a sign of coming ruin, and that the only safe thing to do with me is to get rid of me as quickly and as thoroughly as possible." "Yeah," Marcus said. "And you've been sitting there for 11 days, and nothing happened to anyone who walked past you." "3 beings who passed close to me in the first week," she said, "did subsequently experience misfortune. A Thessi merchant broke his leg. A human child lost a credit chip. A Gren trader's business deal fell through." Marcus stared at her. "Those things happen to people every day," he said. "Yes," Zara said. "They do." She let that sit there between them for a moment. Then she said, "I need to tell you something, Marcus Webb. Something I need you to understand before you decide how far you're willing to take this." "Okay," he said. "The misfortune, the bad luck, the catastrophe that follows the Velkari." She paused. "It isn't random. We don't cause it. You are correct that we don't generate events. But we are drawn toward probability convergences, toward places and times where the near future is unusually dense with significant outcomes. We are attracted to, we cannot help but move toward, the moments that matter." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "So, when you show up somewhere, something is already about to happen there," Zara said. "I didn't come to Keth Station because it was convenient for the Theresi route. I came to Keth Station because something is going to happen here. Something large. Something that changes outcomes on a scale I cannot fully see." Her silver eyes held his. "Something involving you." The market noise kept going around them. Someone 3 stalls over was arguing in Thessi about a price. A child laughed somewhere behind Marcus. He said, "You're serious?" "I have never been anything else," she said. He thought about that. Then he said, "I'm still going to need that motivator coupling. You want to come with me while I pick it up?" Zara stared at him. "You are a very strange human," she said. "I get that a lot," Marcus said. "Come on." He gave her the crew bunk on the Sable Meridian. The ship had 2 berths, one for Marcus, one technically for crew, though Marcus had never had crew. It was small and smelled like the rest of the ship. But it had a door and a lock. And after 11 days chained to a post, Zara treated it like it was a palace suite. He made food. Real food. He had a small but functional galley, and he cooked because it was one of the things that grounded him. Out here in the endless between. He made a grain-based dish he'd adapted from something a Thessi cook had shown him. Vegetable-based because he didn't know Velkari dietary needs and he wasn't going to risk it. And he brought it to her door. She ate it in the doorway, sitting cross-legged, watching him with those unblinking silver eyes. "This is good," she said, with what sounded like genuine surprise. "You can say that with more enthusiasm," he said. "I'm a good cook. Nobody appreciates it out here." A pause. "It is very good," she said, with slightly more enthusiasm. It still sounded like a clinical assessment, but he appreciated the effort. "So," Marcus said, sitting down across the corridor with his own bowl. "What were you doing with the Theresi?" "Research passage," she said. "I paid for berth space on a Theresi collective freighter 8 weeks ago. I needed to reach this sector." "What happened?" 3 days into the voyage, one of the collective's ships suffered a power plant failure. No casualties. But the Theresi captain had been told by another passenger that I was Velkari. He decided that the failure was my fault. She was matter-of-fact about this, the same way you'd describe a delayed connecting flight. They put me off on Keth and kept my passage fee. The chain and sign were an improvisation. They wanted to be rid of me, but didn't want the station authority involvement that comes with abandoning a passenger. So they chained you to a post in the market instead, Marcus said. The sign was meant to communicate that I was freely available for removal, she said. They believed someone would eventually take me, possibly slavers, possibly a research institution, possibly someone who intended harm. Another pause. No one came. Except me, Marcus said. Except you, she agreed. He thought about the power plant failure. He thought about what she'd said. That the Velkari are attracted to convergences, to places where something is about to happen. The ship failure, he said. Did you see it coming? Zara was quiet for a moment. I saw its probability 3 days before it occurred, she said. I reported it to the engineering officer. He told me I was interfering in ship operations and threatened to have me restrained if I came to the engine section again. So you tried to prevent it, Marcus said. Yes. And they blamed you anyway. Yes. That is a really horrible catch-22, Marcus said. Zara tilted her head. Catch-22, I know this reference. The human novel. Yeah. It is an apt description, she agreed. If we say nothing, the event occurs and we are blamed for attracting it. If we warn of the event, we are blamed for causing it. If we prevent it, we are blamed for the disruption prevention requires. She returned to her food. We have never found a way out of it. Marcus looked at his bowl. What's the thing you came here for? The thing you said was coming on this station? Zara set her bowl down. She looked at him with an expression that he was beginning to learn, her version of careful consideration. I will tell you, she said, but I want to ask you something first. Okay. Why did you help me? The true reason, not the surface reason. He thought about it honestly. Because you were sitting there, he said. And you looked like you'd been forgotten, and nobody else was stopping. He looked at his food. I've been out here 6 years. I've seen a lot of people treated like they didn't matter because they were the wrong species or the wrong economic class, or they didn't have the right documentation. And I've walked past more of those situations than I want to think about because I told myself it wasn't my problem. He shrugged. Maybe I was tired of walking past. Zara looked at him for a long time. There are 23 probable futures I can currently perceive, she said quietly, in which Keth Station is still here and inhabited in 1 year's time. You are present in all 23 of them. Marcus processed that. And the futures where Keth Station isn't still here? There are many more of those, she said. And in all of them, you walked past the post. The ship hummed around them. Somewhere in the station, distant, a docking alarm sounded and then silenced. Okay, Marcus said finally. Tell me what's coming. What she told him took an hour. She told him about the Keth Compact, the 400-year-old agreement that had first organized the trade lanes and established the station. She told him about the Dominari hegemony, the largest political power in the region, which had spent the past 50 years quietly buying political influence on every station and colony in the Keth circuit. She told him about the Compact Dissolution Agreement, a legal mechanism buried in the original Compact Charter that allowed any 3 of the 7 founding species to call for a review of station governance. A mechanism that had never been used because it required 3 species to agree on anything, which hadn't happened in 400 years. And she told him that 3 species were about to agree. The Dominari had been working toward this for decades. They'd bought Tharesi council votes. They'd leveraged debt over 2 Gren commercial guilds. They'd run a decade-long influence campaign among the Thessi diplomatic corps. And they were 3 weeks away, maybe 3 weeks, she said the probability was in constant motion, from having enough to call the review. If they call the review, Zara said, the outcome is not in question. The Dominari have the votes. The compact dissolves. Keth Station becomes Dominari territory. And that's bad, Marcus said. Every independent trader currently operating in this sector loses their license, she said. Every non-dominary species currently living on this station loses their residential status. Every contract, every agreement, every arrangement that exists under compact law becomes subject to Dominari law. She paused. There are 314,000 beings on Keth Station. 41% of them have no status under Dominari law. They would be required to leave within 90 days. Marcus was quiet. Why you? He said. You're one person. What can one person do about this? Velkari do not just perceive probable futures, she said. We perceive intervention points. Moments where a small action can deflect a trajectory significantly. She met his eyes. There is an intervention point coming in approximately 3 weeks, and it requires a human. Why a human? Because humans are the only species in the Keth circuit that the Dominari have no leverage over, she said. You're too new, too numerous, too distributed, forgive me, too chaotic in your individual behaviors to be managed as a population. You have no centralized government in this sector. Your economic relationships are too varied to control through a single point. You're the only wild card in the deck. Marcus absorbed this. What's the intervention? I don't know yet, she said. That's the honest answer. I can see its position in time. I can see that it requires a human, a specific human, you. And I can see that it is possible. The specifics are obscured by exactly the kind of probability density that makes precise perception difficult. We're too close to the convergence. So you came here, Marcus said, to find me. I came here, Zara said, because you were here. The finding was already done. He sat with that. Okay, he said for the second time that night. She tilted her head. Just okay? I'm going to need more information, he said, and I suspect you're going to be able to give it to me as we get closer to this 3-week window. In the meantime, I have a delivery run in 28 hours, and the coupling I picked up today should let me make it. You can come or you can stay here. I'll leave you ship access. Either way. He stood up and collected the bowls. But if you're going to be on my ship, I need you to tell me one thing. What? Are we in danger right now? Like tonight? On this station? She considered. There is a 43% probability that the Tharesi Collective will attempt to have you detained for theft of their property. You're not property, Marcus said flatly. I am aware of that, she said. They are not. There is a 43% probability they attempt legal action. There is a 7% probability of direct action. 7% is low, but it's not 0, Marcus said. No, Zara agreed. It is not 0. Then I suggest we leave dock earlier than I planned. He thought. Can you give me a probability on whether my coupling replacement goes smoothly? Zara blinked, seemingly surprised by the change of topic. 81%. Great. I can work with 81%. Get some sleep if you can. We're probably going to have a long 3 weeks. He went to check on the coupling installation. Behind him, he heard Zara say, very quietly, to the empty corridor, 23 futures. All of them you. Before we get to what happened next, I need to tell you something about the Dominari hegemony, because they're about to enter this story in a very personal way. The Dominari were not evil. That's the complicated part. They weren't the galaxy-conquering empire in the stories, the ones who blow up planets because they can. They were a bureaucracy, a very, very effective, very large, very old bureaucracy. And they had decided, with the careful, deliberate certainty of an organization that thought in decades and moved in precise, measured steps, that the most efficient way to organize this sector of space was under a single administrative framework. Their administrative framework, obviously. They had good roads, in the imperial metaphor. Their stations were clean. Their trade regulations were consistent. By many measurable standards, life under Dominari administration was safe, orderly, and predictable. It was also controlled in a way that erased the 41% of Keth Station's population that didn't fit their framework. Not through malice, through the quiet, grinding efficiency of paperwork. Through visa categories that didn't include certain species, through commercial licensing structures that required a physical Dominari sponsor, through residential classifications that assumed a species registry that certain populations were simply not on. It was, Marcus had thought more than once when he let himself think about it, the most dangerous kind of problem, the kind that nobody was actively trying to create. The Dominari didn't want to hurt anyone. They just didn't particularly see certain beings as beings. And they'd built their entire system on that invisible foundation. And now they were about to export it to 314,000 people who had built their lives on the assumption that Keth Station was something else. This was what Zara had come to stop. This was what Marcus had wandered into. And this was why, at 0300 station time, when the Sable Meridian's proximity alert sounded and Marcus checked the camera feed, he was not entirely surprised to see two Theresi officials and a station security officer standing at his docking berth door. He was, however, surprised to hear Zara say, from directly behind him, "Don't answer it." He turned. She was standing in the corridor in the clothes she'd arrived in. He'd have to sort out the clothing situation, her silver eyes calm and alert. "If you don't answer," she said, "they'll present their claim to the dock authority. The dock authority will run a legal check. Under compact law, I was never registered as property with the Theresi Collective. Their claim will fail. It will take approximately 90 minutes. And if I answer the door? 41% chance they attempt physical detention," she said. "The security officer's presence suggests the upper end of that range." Marcus looked at the feed. The security officer was Keth. Big, official. 90 minutes, he said. 90 minutes, she confirmed, after which we can depart on schedule. Marcus looked at the door, looked at the feed, looked at Zara. "Okay," he said. "You want some coffee? I make real coffee. Another thing nobody appreciates out here." "What is coffee?" Zara asked. Marcus stared at her. "Oh," he said. "This is going to be the most important thing that happens tonight, actually." The security official knocked again, patient and official and completely uninvited. Marcus went to make coffee. The delivery run went fine. 81% had been accurate. Marcus hauled a load of medical components from Keth to a colony station called Veth 4, collected his fee, picked up a return cargo of processed mineral composites, and was back at Keth in 60 hours. Zara came with him. She sat in the co-pilot seat and looked at space with an expression that he slowly began to identify as the Velkari equivalent of wonder. Not wide-eyed and obvious, but quiet and deep, like someone receiving confirmation of something they'd always believed. She told him about her people on that voyage. She was the third generation of survivors. Her grandmother had been on Velka when the impact event occurred, had survived because she'd perceived it coming, and had been off-world for 3 months by the time it happened. She'd spent the rest of her life as a refugee, taking her ability with her like contraband, hiding it from the populations that feared it. Her mother had been born on a refugee station, raised under a false name, taught from childhood to behave like any other member of whatever species was most common around her, to blend, to disappear, to never let anyone see the silver eyes go still in that particular way that meant she was looking at something that hadn't happened yet. Zara had been born on a ship, between stations, registered as no species, no origin, no home station. A being of the between spaces, legally speaking. She was 29 years old, and she had never been anywhere long enough to call it home. You said you came to Keth because of the probability convergence, Marcus said, somewhere in the middle of the return trip, looking at the star field. But that's not the whole answer, is it? She was quiet for a moment. No, she said. It isn't. The Velkari. There aren't many of you left. I have found 11 others in 12 years of looking, she said. I believe there may be 20 to 30 total, most in deep concealment. And if the Dominari take Keth Station, Marcus said slowly, and that model expands, if that's what the next century looks like in this sector, then the probability of Velkari survival becomes very small, she said. The Dominari species registry does not include the Velkari. We do not have documentation that their systems accept. We have no homeworld to anchor a claim to. And our ability, she paused, is classified under Dominari law as a Category 3 cognitive enhancement, subject to mandatory registration, monitoring, and in some circumstances, suppression. They would drug you, Marcus said. He was very still. They would drug away your ability. If they knew I had it, she said. Yes. Marcus looked at the stars. Okay, he said. And this time it wasn't calm. It was something harder and quieter. So we're not just doing this for the station. We're doing this for your people. We are doing this because it is the right thing to do, Zara said. Those things happened to coincide. By the time they got back to Keth, Zara's perception of the convergence was sharpening. She explained it like this. The probable future is not a single thing. It is a probability cloud, a vast space of possible outcomes weighted by likelihood. Right now, the most likely futures for Keth Station ran through Dominari control. The compact dissolution was close. The votes were nearly secured. The Dominari had been careful and thorough and patient, and their work was almost done. But probability clouds have edges. And at the edges of the worst outcomes, there were threads, thin, bright threads, that led somewhere else. What Zara could see, increasingly clearly as they returned to the station, was that almost all of those threads had one thing in common. They ran through a man named Counselor Veth Athari. Veth Athari was a Thessi diplomat. The Thessi were a founding member of the Keth Compact, one of the original 7 species. They had 30 votes on the Compact Council. And according to Zara's perception, Veth Athari was not what he appeared to be. He voted with the Dominari Coalition twice this month, she said, as they came through Keth's docking approach. The Thessi population believes he is a committed Compact defender. He He has made many speeches to that effect. He gave an address last week calling the Dominari expansion the greatest threat to independent governance in the sector's history. But, Marcus said. But his private communications suggest otherwise. His public position is a performance. He has an arrangement with the Dominari. His loyalty and his votes in exchange for a Dominari administrative position when the transition completes. Marcus processed this. How do you know about his private communications? Zara looked at him. I don't. I know what his future communications will be, which allows me to infer the current state. Right, Marcus said. Right, okay. He focused on the docking sequence. So he's the swing vote, if he breaks from the Dominari. The coalition loses Thessi support, which they need. Without the Thessi, the compact dissolution cannot proceed. The review cannot be called. She paused. The most likely window for breaking his arrangement is in 11 days. There is a moment, a specific event, when the truth of his position will be undeniable to his own people. What event? A meeting, she said, between Vethathari and the lead Dominari negotiator, scheduled as a private diplomatic consultation. In that meeting, documentation of their arrangement will be exchanged. Documentation that the Thessi Council would want to see. Marcus said slowly. Very much so. And you know this because in 20 of the 23 surviving futures, someone is present at that meeting, she said, recording it. Marcus stared at the docking bay as the sable meridian slid into her berth. Someone, he said. A human, she said, with a small recording device, in the ventilation service corridor that runs adjacent to the private diplomatic suite on level 12. He turned to look at her. Zara, he said, are you asking me to spy on a diplomatic meeting? I am telling you what the probable futures suggest, she said, in a tone of perfect diplomatic innocence. What you do with that information is entirely your decision. That's very legally precise of you. I have had a great deal of practice being precise about things I cannot be seen to have caused. Marcus exhaled slowly. He thought about 41% of 314,000 people. He thought about 11 Velkari in the universe. He thought about Zara, 29 years old, born on a ship, registered as nothing. 11 days, he said. What do I do for 11 days? Live your life, she said. Make your runs, repair your ship, cook your food, be entirely normal. She paused. And buy a very small recording device. The 11 days were not quiet. On day 3, 2 men, human, which was unusual, approached Marcus in the lower market. They were well-dressed, which was also unusual. They said they represented an interstellar trade consultancy, and they had heard he was interested in compact governance matters. Marcus said he was just a hauler and didn't know what they were talking about. They gave him a card and said to call if he changed his mind. Marcus took the card to Zara. She held it without looking at it for a moment, and then she said, Dominari intelligence. Probably second tier. They're fishing, not certain. They know a human with a new companion has been asking questions at the Station Traders Association. I haven't been asking questions, Marcus said. You renewed your trading license, she said, and mentioned in conversation with the licensing officer that you were thinking about how the political situation might affect your routes. The officer mentioned it to a colleague. Word travels. Marcus looked at the card. Should I be worried? Yes, she said, but not yet. Their certainty is low. They're gathering information. They won't move until they're sure of the value of what they have. How long does that give her? 8 days, she said. if things proceed as they are likely to proceed. Which gives us 3 days of margin, he said, almost to himself. 3 days of margin, she confirmed. And if things don't proceed as likely? She looked at him steadily. Then we improvise. That is what the 23 viable futures have in common, beyond your presence. A willingness to improvise. He went and bought the recording device that afternoon. On day 7, the Tharesi Merchant Collective filed a formal complaint with Keth Station Authority, claiming that Marcus had stolen property registered under their commercial charter. Zara had predicted this. She had also predicted the outcome. The station legal office would spend 5 days reviewing the claim, find that no such property registration existed in the compact database, and dismiss the complaint. The Tharesi would be fined for filing a frivolous claim. The fine would be small, but irritating. This all happened exactly as she said it would. Marcus watched it happen and found that there was something deeply unsettling about knowing the ending in advance. Not because the ending was bad, but because of what it meant to have that knowledge at all. "Does it bother you?" he asked her on day 9. They were eating dinner. He'd made something with actual protein this time. He'd found a market stall that stocked something close enough to chicken that his body didn't argue with it. Knowing what's probably going to happen. All the time. Zara ate in silence for a moment. "It is difficult to explain to beings who don't have the ability," she said finally. "It is not like watching a recording of the future. It is more like standing in a room full of smoke, where shapes are visible but not clearly, and the shapes are in constant motion, and the motion of your own position in the room changes what you can see." "That sounds exhausting," Marcus said. "It is," she said simply. "My grandmother used to say it was like trying to sleep in a room where many people are having conversations. You can't stop hearing them. You can't make them quiet. You can only learn to live with the noise." He thought about that. "Is there anything that makes it easier?" She looked at him with an expression he was slowly learning to read as something close to warmth, expressed in the Velkari way, which was subtle enough that most beings wouldn't catch it. "Certainty helps," she said. "When things resolve from probability into fact, the noise quiets. It is only the unmade choices that generate it. So, when I make a choice, the futures that depended on you choosing otherwise collapse," she said. Quite quickly. "It is peaceful in a way to be near someone who makes choices without hesitation." Marcus thought about the post in the market, about the 10 steps across the crowd. "I hesitate," he said. "I just don't always show it." "I know," Zara said. "I can see the hesitation resolve. It's one of the things that makes you—" She stopped. "Makes me what?" She returned to her food. "One of the things that makes you useful for this task," she said. But something in her voice had shifted, and Marcus filed it away. Day 10, day 11. The ventilation service corridor on level 12 was exactly where Zara said it would be. Marcus had done 3 things to prepare. He'd obtained a level 12 maintenance access badge through a contact at the station facilities office, which was legal and had taken 2 days. He'd spent an evening running the actual corridors to know the layout in the dark. And he'd tested the recording device until he could operate it with his eyes closed and one hand. He'd also told exactly one person what he was doing. Not Zara. She already knew, or she knew its probability, which was close enough. He'd told a human woman named Petra Solis, who was a licensed journalist working for an interstellar news cooperative. who had been on Keth Station for 3 weeks, covering what she described as the quietest political story she'd ever been assigned. He'd told her because Zara had said, "The recording needs to be in the hands of someone who can verify it and distribute it before the Dominari can suppress it. A private individual with a recording is a criminal. A journalist with verified documentation is a story." Petra had stared at him for a long moment when he'd explained the situation. Then she'd said, "How do you know this meeting is happening?" "I have a source," Marcus had said. "A Velkari source," Petra said. Because she was a journalist and she was observant, Zara had been seen around the station by this point. The silver eyes and moving hair were difficult to miss. "I have a source," Marcus had said again. Petra had thought about it. Then she'd said, "If the recording is authentic and the documentation is real, this is the story of the decade." "More than that," Marcus said. "It's the story that keeps 300,000 people in their homes." She'd agreed. The meeting was scheduled for the 11th day, 1400 station time. Marcus was in the service corridor by 1300. He had an hour of waiting in the dark, in a space about 3 feet wide, in the intermittent sound of ventilation fans, trying not to think about the 7% probability of direct action that had been hanging over this entire enterprise since the first night. At 1347, the probability of that 7% shifted. He felt his comm buzz, one of the patterns Zara had set as a signal. He pulled it out. She'd sent a single word, "moved." He processed that. He processed what it might mean. Then he sent back, "Direction?" Her reply was 12 seconds later. "Coming to you. Stay." He stayed. At 1402, Vethathari arrived. Marcus could hear footsteps in the corridor outside. The meeting suite was separated from the service corridor by a wall panel and about 8 inches of insulated space. He heard the door. He heard voices. He activated the recorder. The Dominari negotiator, he would be identified in subsequent reporting as Subdirector Kale, Dominari Internal Affairs Commerce Division, spoke for about 4 minutes in a language Marcus didn't know. Then he switched to Keth Standard, apparently for clarity, and he said, "The documentation confirms the agreed compensation package. Your votes on the review motion are the final requirement. Once confirmed, your appointment to the Keth Administrative Oversight Board will be formalized." Vethathari's response was quiet, careful. It took 2 minutes and contained 3 very clear things. Confirmation of his agreement, acknowledgement of the compensation, and a specific discussion of the timing of his vote. Every word of it was on the recorder. Marcus waited until the meeting ended and both sets of footsteps had moved away. Then he stayed in the service corridor for another 20 minutes because Zara had said, "Don't leave immediately. The corridors will be checked." At 1440, he walked out of the service corridor, maintenance badge on his collar, looking bored in the way that maintenance workers look bored everywhere in the galaxy. At 1445, he was in a public communications alcove, transmitting the encrypted file to Petra Solis. At 1512, Petra Solis's cooperative had 3 senior journalists verifying the file. At 1623, the story went on the wire. What happened next moved faster than Marcus had expected, and Zara, for the first time in their 3 weeks together, looked something that was close to relieved. The Thessi Council recalled Vethathari within 2 hours of the story publication. They didn't suspend him because the Thessi moved carefully in matters of public dignity. They recalled him for consultation, which, in Thessi diplomatic language, meant exactly the same thing. The Dominari coalition lost their Thessi votes. The coalition lost their Thessi votes, and without the Thessi, They didn't have 3 founding species. And without 3 founding species, they couldn't call the review. The compact dissolution motion died without being filed. It was less dramatic than the story deserved. There was no battle, no confrontation, no final clash. The probability thread that Zara had followed across the sector, the one she'd chained herself to a post to reach, the one that Marcus had stumbled into on a Tuesday looking for a motivator coupling. It resolved, as most consequential things do, in a series of very boring procedural steps that changed everything. That evening, Marcus made dinner. Zara sat across from him in the small galley and ate without speaking for a while. Then she said, "The 23 futures are 37 now." Marcus looked up from his food. "The station?" "The station, the people, the remaining threads." She was quiet for a moment. "And some new ones, smaller ones, personal." He looked at her. She was looking at her plate, and her hair, those white streaks that moved, were moving more actively than usual, which he had learned was associated with high probability resolution, when things settled from possible to actual. "Zara," he said. She looked up. "Do you have somewhere you're supposed to go?" he asked. "After this, is there a next convergence, a next thing you came to do?" She held his gaze. "There is always a next thing," she said. "There are always convergences to find. There are always—" She stopped, started again. "There is a settlement in the Veth system," she said. "It is small. It is quiet. It exists in a part of the sector where the probability cloud is relatively calm. A small number of Velkari live there. 7. They have asked me for many years to come." "Why didn't you?" "Because there was always a next thing," she said. "Because stopping felt—" She searched for the word. "Irresponsible." There was always somewhere the ability was needed, always a convergence, always a thread that required following. Marcus set down his fork. "And now?" She looked at him with those silver eyes. The moving hair, the iridescent skin in the galley's warm light. "The probability of a crisis requiring my immediate involvement," she said, "is currently 4%. "That's the lowest you've mentioned since we met?" he said. "It is the lowest it has been," she said, "in 11 years. Marcus thought about that. He thought about the Sable Meridian and his route, and a patch of green land he'd been saving toward without much conviction. He thought about 11 Velkari in the universe, and 7 of them in a quiet settlement in the Veth system, and a woman who had spent 11 years following crises to prevent them, and had never once stopped moving. "The Veth system is on the circuit," he said. "Yes," she said carefully. "My route goes through Veth 4, he said. "I stop there 6-7 times a year." She was very still. "I could probably," Marcus said, as if working out a logistics problem, "expand the route, hit Veth 3. There's a colony there, small, mostly agricultural, but they have trade needs, reliable cargo work probably." "Probably," Zara said, very quietly. "Good regular route. Keth, Veth 4, Veth 3. Maybe Veth 2 on the return. Practical, commercially sound." He picked his fork back up. "I'd need a good co-pilot. Someone who could handle the second navigation console." He looked at her. "You any good at navigation?" Zara was quiet for 5 seconds, which was, he had learned, her version of speechless. "I can perceive the most probable safe transit windows through any stellar approach I have data on," she finally said. "I have never lost a ship I was aboard." "That's an excellent reference," Marcus said. "The pay is modest. The ship smells like machine oil and garlic. The food is very good." Another pause. Shorter this time. "I accept," Zara said. They left Keth Station on a Thursday, or what passed for Thursday on a station that ran a 26-hour clock. The Sable Meridian pulled out of berth 41, cleared the station's traffic control zone, and turned its nose toward Veth. Marcus ran the pre-jump checks. Zara ran the navigation console, methodical, precise, occasionally saying things like, "Adjust heading 4 degrees starboard," with a certainty that he was no longer surprised to find was always correct. He had filed the expanded route paperwork. He had registered a co-pilot. The co-pilot's name was listed on the official Keth licensing database as Zara Webb. This had not been discussed. He had done it, and then he had been mildly embarrassed about the assumption, and he had started to explain, and she had said, "It simplifies the documentation." And then she had gone back to the navigation console. He wasn't going to push it. As Keth Station fell behind them and the stars stretched ahead, Zara said, 44 probable futures now." "Is that good?" he asked. "It's very good," she said. "What's in them?" She was quiet for a moment. Not the calculating quiet, the other kind. The kind he'd started to recognize as something personal. "Mornings," she said finally. "Very many mornings. And your food, which is consistently better than the probable average, and..." She paused, and her hair moved slowly. "People who are somewhere safe, in a future I couldn't see a month ago." Marcus looked at the stars. 44, he said. 44, she said. The Sable Meridian accelerated toward Veth, and behind it, Keth Station turned its slow arc around its star, and 314,000 beings lived their lives in a future that very nearly didn't happen, because a man from Ohio was tired of walking past. That's the story of Marcus Webb and Zara, the woman who could see probable futures, chained to a post with a sign that said nobody wanted her, waiting for the one being in the galaxy who would look. And I want you to think about that. Not the sci-fi of it, the actual thing underneath it. The idea that sometimes the most important thing you can do, the thing that changes everything, that deflects the trajectory of a future you didn't even know was in danger, is just stopping. When everyone else keeps walking, that's the story. I hope it was worth your hour. If you want another one like this, the video on screen right now is the one to watch next. It's a similar vibe. First contact, one ordinary person, enormous stakes. You will not regret it. Hit subscribe if this is the first one of these you've found. There are a lot more where this came from. See you in the next one.